expecting PlayStation football, and they're already frustrated. If you get produce a performance where Copenhagen are taking the initiative, there'll be even more grounds of frustration. To deep, Then wants to try and release it, he's been stopped from doing so.
Joel made a really good point before the game. One of the person that is so important.
Okay, first and foremost, profound apologies for the delay. It's an hour, we're an hour late. This is most unusual, and I apologise on behalf of the council. So welcome to the Southern Rural Community Forum. It is, of course, an opportunity for the local community to be more involved and influence the work of North Herts Council members and officers. In accordance with the council policy, this meeting is being recorded, as you probably see. The recordings will be made available both on the council's YouTube channel as well as on the council's ModGov site alongside the documents from the meeting. I'd like to welcome everybody, of course, members, officers, members of the public, and Inspector Lant, who's come along to talk to us this evening. Before the meeting starts, I'd like to invite the community officer to explain how proceedings will work and undertake a roll call of those attending online and ensure that they can hear.
Perfect, thank you. So I will quickly just go through one by one people attending online, and if you could just unmute and then just so we can make sure that we can hear you. So first I'll do Councillor Graziano. You can just let me know that you can hear us and we can hear you.
Hello, good evening. Yes, I can.
Perfect, thank you. Next I'll go to Councillor Foster from Wymondley Parish Council.
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you very much.
Perfect, thank you. And next I'll go to Councillor Gilbert from Wymondley Parish Council as well. You just let us know you can hear us.
Yes, hello, I can hear you. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. When it does come to when it comes to the voted recommendations for the applications, for yourself, Councillor Graziano, if you can just sort of tell us, you don't need to sort of put your hand up or anything like that. It'll just be when it comes to voting, we'll say what's your recommendation, just to let you know when it does get to that point. Perfect, thank you.
Okay, thank you. This, of course, isn't a formal meeting, and the public are allowed to speak and ask questions, but please, if you raise your hand, if possible, say your name. I'm sure it is possible, isn't it? Raise your hand and say your name when you wish to speak. We'll be receiving presentations from community groups seeking grant funding, and welcome to them, and apologies again. Councillors will be voting to make a recommendation to the executive member for community and partnerships, which means basically that we will hear your grant applications this evening. We may be asking you a few questions, and we will make recommendations which will pass on to the executive member, who hopefully will rubber stamp our recommendations. Usually happens. In the event of a tied vote, I'll have the casting vote. So we have apologies for absence. Okay, all right. From Lisa Nash, Vijay Papalasaram, and Laura Williams. Are there any others been reported there? No? Okay, fine. So moving on, it says here.
Can we go straight to the police report?
I'm sorry?
Should we go straight to our police report?
Yes. Yeah, we're going to change the agenda just a little bit here, and I'd like to invite Inspector James Lant to give us a quick report. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, councillors. Thank you for inviting me to today's meeting. I'm very pleased to be here. Yeah, I'm here to give the police update in relation to the Southern Rural for last year for the committee meeting, and really looking forward to doing so. Just a quick intro from me and what I'm going to talk about today. I'll be going through the neighbourhood policing team structure and also give you an update around our resourcing challenges currently. I'll cover some information about our local priorities that are currently in place, set in January, some crime data that I'll talk about. as well as our new community engagement system, Hearts Connected. I've had some written questions from some of the councillors. I'll hopefully answer most of that in what I say, but if there's anything I need to cover in the wash up at the end, I'll be very happy to. I was going to talk about some examples of our community engagements in the area of the last year, but I've actually I believe a presentation has been circulated to all of you, which gives quite a nice flavour of that for both Hitchin Rural and my other area in Royston over the last year. So I'll leave you to review that. But if anyone has any questions when they've read through that, very welcome to contact me afterwards. And just an apology from Sergeant Gill, your local sergeant. He's not available to attend this evening. Does send his apologies, and he's given me a couple of messages which I'll relay at the end as well. So I'm here instead. So just talking about our structure currently, we still have Chief Inspector Hannah Treadwell, who's the North Herts Area Commander, and it's myself who looks after the whole of North Hertfordshire Neighbourhood Policing. Sergeant Gill, I've already mentioned, is still Hitchin Rural Sergeant, and he's now supported by PCSO Supervisor Stuart Stone. So we have a good coverage of supervision for the area. In terms of your PCs and PCSOs at the moment, we have Greg Graham, who covers Chesfield and Great Ashby, PC Brad Collins, Hitchwood, Kimpton, Offa, including Offley and Purton, as well as Who as well, and all the areas in there, Breachwood Green, Tea Green, Preston, Kings Walden and Lily. And we also have PC Grace Moore, who's joined us over the last year, who is responsible for Codicat and Nebworth. And in terms of my PCSO coverage, I currently have Stuart Stone, who I mentioned before, and also the famous Heather Burrows, who I've already discussed with several of you today, and I'll be giving an update around her very shortly. There's going to be lots of good news in this update, but there's also some bad news, I'm afraid. I'll probably start with a bit of bad news, and that's around my resourcing since last year's update. There was a review conducted in the second half of 2024 of all the neighbourhood policing teams in Hertfordshire. And as a result of that review, I've had my numbers reduced, which is obviously creating challenges in terms of managing current levels of demand. So overall, I've lost 3 PCs. So that's a 20 down to 17 reduction, so 15%. And I've also lost 4 PCSOs, which is nearly a 30% reduction. So certainly not good news for me and the other managers of North Herts CSP. So it's about us working even more smarter with ever more finite resources as levels of demand continue to increase, not decrease. It looks like there'll be no prospect of that changing over at least the next financial year. I know, like many public bodies, including many councils, the financial landscape is extremely challenging, and it's within that context that these difficult decisions have been made. So I've talked about the PCSO reduction. Of course, that links onto PCSO Heather Burrows, who retires on the 11th of April after just shy of 25 years service. She will be hugely missed by all of those who know her in this room, and by me and the other officers who've known her well. She's a huge loss to the wards that she serves, and irreplaceable without question. I've had some questions about who's going to replace her. So obviously I've already mentioned about the reduction in my numbers across the CSB, those 4 PCSO posts. So I already have a smaller pool to call from. The other challenge is the recruitment of PCSOs. Hertfordshire Police has been advertising PCSO posts for many, many months now, and this is a county-wide advert, and across the county there's been a marked reduction in applications, so low that they've not been able to run a process for some considerable time now. So as things stand now, I have no ready pipeline of new PCSOs arriving anytime soon. So in terms of who I'm going to get to replace PCSO Burrows, that is a work in progress in terms of being able to answer that question for those councillors who I know are very concerned that we're going to lose that visibility imminently. We're trying to understand why that level of interest is so low currently. We think there are a number of reasons. Post-COVID, I think the job market has changed in terms of expectations. I think where a job doesn't offer working from home, that's a blockage for a lot of people. Many officers apply for PCSOs to become regular PCs, but we are already advertising for PCs. So again, that sort of diverted pipeline is going straight into the main process. I think there might be concerns around the future of the PCSO role in Hertfordshire. We have a new Chief Constable from Essex, and some councillors may be aware that they are disbanding PCSOs in Essex. There's been a lot of concern about whether that might happen in Hertfordshire. And just to reassure, there are no plans for the PCSO role to be abolished, and the new Chief Constable has made that very, very clear. But I think just a swirl of factors which might explain why that pipeline of new recruitment has completely stopped, and that therefore makes solutions around replacing retiring PCSOs just that much harder. Myself and Chief Inspector Treble are on the case, trying to find solutions and something that works. Important not to solve one problem by moving one from one area, and I then have a problem from that area because that area loses their PCSO and the other one gains. So it's a game of musical chairs, but one I'm working on very hard with the Chief Inspector. And as soon as I can provide a solution, I will do so. There is a little bit of good news, and that's with regards to our rural operational support team. Some of you may be aware of them. They're a county-wide resource of specialist officers that are trained and equipped to deal with rural crime, rural-related incidents in those areas, including in North Herts. And for some time, they were running under strength. It's a sergeant and 6, but they were only on 3 PCs for some time. There's been a recruitment process recently that was successful, and I think as of the end of May, they're going to be fully staffed. They're being restructured, which means there'll be 3 teams of 2 will align themselves for the first time with the 3 neighbourhood teams, and that will enable us to build much better relationships with those officers and tap into that resilience in the context of our reduced numbers to hopefully give us some support around some of our more challenging and resource intensive rural problems in Hitchin rural, southern rural, sorry, and also on the other side in Royston. So that's good news coming down the line, and that might be one of the smart ways we need to start working. If I move on to our priorities at the moment, they're reset in January for Southern Rural, and there were 2 areas that were identified following consultation with yourselves and public and other partners. Speeding is currently a priority. We have Breachwood Green, the Heath and Darley Road, and Nebworth Park Lane and Stevenage Road. And Councillor Graziano, I know you've been asking for some information around what's been happening in that regard. Secondly is residential burglary, Nebworth and Codicott being the focus. And having spoken to Councillor Ward, I know there's still a lot of community anxiety around drones being used and recent burglaries in the Dear's End Lane area of Nebworth. I'll come to that in a minute. In terms of how we deal with, just talking generally about our priorities, we've done a complete redesign over the last year because we were struggling to move other demands out of the way to give us proper time to focus on our priorities. So what we now do is, and this is across the 3 teams, we allocate dedicated days, and these are called days of action, where we will deal with nothing but our priorities. And obviously I have a team spread across 3 stations and 3 teams, but they will all come together on their dedicated days. They'll be protected from other duties, and they will be there solely to be out there, whether it be dealing with speeding, whether it be dealing with burglary here, or other speeding issues elsewhere in the division, because it is an issue for the whole area. So in terms of how we're responding to these priorities, this is another bit of bad news, and I'll talk about speeding first. I mentioned about the funding challenges that the constabulary is facing, which means there is probably in my 25 years service more pressure on monitoring every penny that's spent that I've ever seen before. And this has had an impact in our response to speeding. What I'm talking about there is around our laser devices. We have 3 at each of the stations, 1 in Hitchin, 1 in Letchworth, and 1 in Royston. And they have to be calibrated every year. And there is quite a significant cost to that happening. And there's been a decision made to reduce the number that are calibrated at any one time, and that's for cost-saving reasons. And it means that I currently have access to only 1 calibrated laser for the whole of North Hertfordshire at any one time. That brings with it logistical challenges when we're looking to set up speeding operations as a result, and it's difficult. However, the other devices are still usable. So it's not that we've put them in a box and forgotten about them, but they can't be used evidentially, and that's the problem. So an officer can still stand on the roadside, they can clock someone's speed, they have the power to stop the vehicle, give advice, all the usual things, check the state of the vehicle, all the legality things can still be done. But in terms of enforcement of that speeding driver, that's not possible without access to a calibrated laser, which is now floating between the 3 areas of the division, and we are doing our best to coordinate that so that each area, including the Southern Rural, gets sufficient coverage and sufficient provision of that device. I've reviewed, if I just move on, it's not just about enforcement. I mentioned last year around the Police and Crime Commissioner's Drive Safe scheme. That is a team of police staff who deploy in vans around the county. The public is able to report problems of speeding, and that van will go and locate itself in that hotspot, and they will clock the speeding and send a letter. Again, it's not an enforcement activity, I'm afraid, because they're not police officers, but I understand there is a scheme where a letter will be written to a driver who's clocked speeding. If they're clocked again, if we get repeat offenders, they'll then get a personal visit from a police officer, which often has the desired effect around them moderating their behaviour in future. Alongside that, there's still the Drive Safe volunteer scheme, where local residents can be trained up to, you might well have seen them standing at the roadside, to use the laser device, again, non-evidentially, and they will record data and number plates of people speeding. And the same process follows that as well, around that graduated letter and then a police officer visit. And we have other tactics as well around targeting repeat offenders through intelligence-led policing, focusing on particular areas where we see speeding vehicles. And when we're moving in a car, we are still able to stop people and deal with them accordingly. But the issue are those static operations that we are struggling with at the moment. So as a result, I've reviewed today our activity under this new priority, and that there has certainly been activity by the local officers, PC Brad Collins and PC Moore as well. We're trying to focus it down. So we used to do an objective, for example, speeding in Royston Rural, which is setting ourselves up to fail. It's an enormous area. So that's why we're going down to particular streets, listening to the public, trying to get that temperature check of where we're seeing most reports, and that led to these locations being identified. Now, that activity is there, and I can see that a number of speed check operations have been carried out in those areas since January, but I can confirm none of them have resulted in any enforcement, and that is because of the issue of the laser gun. That is something I need to take forward and find a way to ensure that the public we serve are getting that commensurate level of enforcement from the police. Education is, of course, an important element to consider, and in certain scenarios that is appropriate instead of enforcement, but there are clearly going to be times where that important power is not available to us due to the limitations around that device. If I move on to residential burglaries, so the other priorities around Knebworth and Codicott. Certainly Councillor Ward will be aware, Knebworth has been a particular focus of our activity in recent months following the spike, which started last November and December. I know has caused a lot of community anxiety, which is still evident today, as he informed me earlier. I have looked at the data around that, because often with residential burglary, you've got perception versus reality. And yes, there is clearly still that concern, but we have seen a reduction in the reports. There was a spike in October, November, December last year. We've looked back since October last year, and there have been 10 offences in total of burglary. The most recent was in mid-February, and they've been spread across Deards End Lane, Deards Wood, and the 2 locations in both those areas, and then single reports in other areas, including Bell Close, DB Close, Park Lane, Stobart's Close, and Stonecroft. So there was a question, I think it was from you, Councillor, around what have we been doing about it? And very pleased to say that certainly when we had that increase at the end of the year, we put in place a full proactive operation in response. It was a mixture of high visibility policing, covert policing as well, very much intelligence-led, crime data, hotspot information-led. And this was all about showing ourselves as a visible presence, and also seeking opportunities to stop and search individuals. There were a number of stop searches conducted over that period. They didn't sadly result in any arrests, but it is of note that as a result of that activity, that's pretty much immediately where we saw that reduction. We are still seeing reports now there, but it's hitting I hate to say normal level, because burglary should never be thought of as normal, but it's no longer an outlier as it was previously. Alongside that, there's the usual preventative work, which we do. So where there is a burglary is committed, we will visit the IP, we will complete a crime prevention pack with them. It's called a cocooning pack, which is full of information about how they target harden to prevent them being a victim of burglary. Again, we do that with the neighbours on each side as well, and there should be a visit to every address on that street also. That is standard practice, and whenever there is a burglary, Hearts Connected, if the residences are signed up on that road, they will get notification that a burglary has taken place, and again include relevant crime prevention advice in there as well. Some of you may be aware of these unusual reports of drones that we've received being flown above Knebworth, which, given the concerns from the community, there is that worry that it might be linked to criminals changing their tactics in terms of sending up a drone, assessing addresses for a potential break-in at those locations. I mean, very happily, we don't see any evidence that's happening, but it's still causing a lot of community disquiet. So this has been quite a tough one for police to respond to. We've been out there a number of times, and I think some of the reports have actually turned out to be planes. Some of them, a small number, do seem to be genuine reports. And we don't know the answer as to the question of why are they up there. It might be innocent, it might not be. So the key need is to identify where those drones are being operated from. So some good news again. I mentioned about our rural operational support team and the specialist equipment they've got. They have access to a bit of kit called an aeroscope, which I've never heard of before. I don't know if anyone in here has, but I'm told it's a device that can detect the radio waves that the drone is communicating with and where those radio waves lead to, so we can actually then find the operator of that drone. And we're just in the process now of setting up an operation with Ross where we're going to be out there. I've heard mostly they seem to be happening later in the day. I don't know if that's fully correct or not, but we're going to be out there. We're going to find these operators, and we will find out what the story is. It might still be innocent, but it's causing clearly a lot of concern, and we need to get to the bottom of it. And just one other thing with regards to Knebworth, we've recently installed what's called a spike camera. That's just north of Knebworth, which is a covert camera. It's linked to our automatic number plate recognition system, and it obviously is a very powerful tool for us to identify vehicles used by criminals coming in and out of the area, and that's active now, and I think is a really, really good step forward. If I talk about Codicop briefly, because they're there as well as one of our priorities, thankfully their crime level for burglary is much, much lower. I did look at the stats. We've had 2 burglaries and 1 attempted burglary since January, which in the context of our general burglary reporting is very low. What we are doing is more on that preventative work, which I mentioned earlier. So whilst those stats are low, we can use opportunities and still show that we are doing things to tackle that concern for the community. And that's about visits to streets where we've seen historic burglaries committed, Hearts Connected sign-ups, which I'll talk about a bit later, crime prevention advice, and again, getting them plugged into that community engagement system so they can report their concerns directly into us, and we can tell them if something has happened of concern in that area. But thankfully, it's actually quite low there, and I'm very hopeful it's going to remain the case. I'll talk about fly tipping briefly, because I think that was a question on one of the councillors' emails. It's not a priority for us currently, but it's absolutely still something that we focus on very, very carefully. Regular targeted patrols across Hitchin Rural, particularly including Knebworth and Kimpton at the moment. We do days of action with our friends at North Herts Council on the community safety team. I think the vastness of the area is such a challenge for us and continues to be so, and also having enough intelligence to know when to target those patrols and where. We did used to receive monthly data from North Herts Council of all the reports of fly tipping. I just made some inquiries for this meeting. We don't seem to be getting that anymore. And that's something I need to take away with me, because, you know, essentially it means we're flying a little bit blind. I know conversations are happening. It's not that we're not speaking to to John Marshall and Dave Furr and others in the team. We work very, very well with them, but it would be useful to return to that evidence base to give us half a chance of actually being in the right place at the right time. But it is always going to be that challenge. We have Luton across the border. We have the push factor coming out of there with regards to some of you might be aware, these cannabis grow dumps that are coming from cannabis farms in the Luton or surrounding area. They bring it across the border and they dump it there. That's a massive, massive issue for us, and I know can cause huge cost for landowners, particularly if it's dumped on private land, and also it can very often be very dangerous to deal with as well. So we see that there's work to do there, primarily around our relationship with Bedfordshire Police. Again, because of the Luton factor, so much of their demand is sucked into that area. But we have gotten in with them now, and we're looking to set up regular cross-border meetings with them to exchange intelligence, exchange information, and look at undertaking some joint patrols as well. And I think that's where this problem isn't going to go away. So we've got to stop thinking around county boundaries and actually come up with a smarter way of dealing with this. I'm not saying for 1 minute it's going to completely solve it, but I think we need to work smarter. And I think we need to build those relations. So we have the first meeting booked with them, their team, on the 23rd of April. Their inspector and me are going to link up as well. And I'm going to hope we're going to see some fruit being born from that in the near future. But still really important to get that information from North Herts Council so we can act on it and respond dynamically. I'll just talk about crime data. This can be quite dry, so I'll sort of go through some headlines here. I think last year I went down to ward level, but I'm conscious this could just become really overcomplicated here. So I'm going to talk about Southern Rural. If anyone wants specific data for their wards, please feel free to email me and I can provide everything for every crime type in the last 12 months. So I'm just going to give the flavour of where we are in the division and where we are in the context of Hertfordshire. So I can say that all overall crime in keep calling it Hitchin Rural, Southern Rural in the last year is up 9.9% overall. The county is 10%, so it's very much in line with that increase. It is an outlier in so much as North Herts overall, because North Herts overall we're on nearly a 21% increase, which is very concerning. There are some explanations for some of that increase, which I will come to. And quite a bit of this is around how we're changing the way we record certain crime types, and one in particular that has led to a significant increase in crime recording. Residential burglary, I've already touched upon. So despite those concerns of the residents in Nebworth, I can say with a big smile on my face that overall for Southern Rural, we've got just under 23% reduction in residential burglaries compared to 23-24, and that is massive. When we look at the county as a whole, is only down 3%. So we are many, many times over and bucking the trend there. I think there's a number of reasons for that. I think Hearts Connected is a massive part of that, and I very much hope everyone in this room is signed up to that. And if not, please do so. The area is in a good place. That is a huge reduction. I think we are so smart and so fast now in responding to reports and getting those messages out to the right people, as I touched upon earlier. And it's just good old-fashioned target hardening as well, good old-fashioned crime prevention messaging, sending out our specialist crime prevention officer into those areas, which we've done numerous times over the last year, where we're seeing an increase and trying to get ahead of the problem. There will always be areas that are vulnerable to this kind of activity, and there are some rural areas that are particularly vulnerable because sadly our criminal fraternity know where the police are located. They'll often know what our likely response time is. And again, if we're talking about cross-border criminality, which drives some of this, that's a real challenge for North Herts. We have Bedfordshire on the left, we have Cambridgeshire on the right, and criminals do not respect county boundaries. We are always going to be up against that as a division sitting on that county border. I can also say for residential but non-residential, so these are things like shed breaks, outbuildings, that sort of thing, we are also down just over 22% for Hitchin Rural in the last 12 years, and that's against a county increase of just shy of 32%, which is a significant increase. And I don't know what the reasons are behind that, but we are again an outlier. We are up on burglary business. This is going to mostly be rural locations, farm buildings, outbuildings, this sort of thing. So Southern Rural, we're on a 9% increase. I will say that's quite a low number. It's up from 11 to 12. So often you can hear these quite concerning stats, but if they increase from a low number, that can explain it. But that is enough of an increase for us to be focusing on that. What I was going to say is crime prevention is the key here. Yes, we visit these sites, and in the presentation I've given, there's some examples of us visiting farming locations in Southern Rural, but also coming back to the working smarter theme, I'm very happy to talk about something called CSER, which is a unique vehicle marking system that's been available nationally for a number of years. And it seems to me like a very powerful bit of kit. And North Herts, in conjunction with East Hertfordshire, are currently bidding to the PCC's Community Safety Fund for funding to roll this out to our farming community. So this kit, it can protect things like tractors and plants, and these things are often worth tens of thousands of pounds, if not hundreds of thousands. And the big problem is being able to put in place a kit that means that they become unattractive to a thief or a burglar to take, because that vehicle will be identified and therefore more likely to be recovered. And they will always move on to areas where that risk is not there. That bid is working through at the moment. I've had a briefing on CSER, and if anyone's interested in it, it stands for the Construction and Agricultural Equipment Security and Registration Scheme. You can Google it. It looks absolutely fantastic, and I'm very hopeful that we'll get that funding authorised, and then we will look at how we target getting that rolled out across the two CSPs. But it is essentially, it's a national data tagging scheme that cannot be broken, no matter how much a criminal might try. It's genuinely unbreakable. So good news for theft from motor vehicle. We're down just under 14%. I know one of the councils mentioned concerns around that, but we are heading in the right direction. The county is just under 20, so not quite as good overall, but North Hart's 20. It's heading there, but I do know the numbers may be improving, but it is still a very sensitive issue, particularly people who might suffer something like a van break. Their tools are stolen, and that can be their livelihood sometimes. So we still do quite a lot of work around that, particularly using our Scorpion proactive team. When we do see any sort of spike appearing in this area, they will be out there. They'll move shifts to half nights. They'll move shifts to whatever they need to be out there and try and target this criminality. What I would say is North Harts, in this regard, for this kind of crime type, is its own worst enemy. If somewhere like Stevenage, you identify a crime hotspot, you throw your resource at it. So often in North Harts, it is just scattered across the division. And it's very difficult to pull out patterns of behaviour in such a vast area. And it is a challenge for us to know where we need to be and when we need to be there. But we certainly try our best in that regard. Robbery is up 50%, which sounds absolutely horrendous. What I would say, it was only 2 in the previous year. It's now gone up by 1 to 3. So that's 3 for the entire year. A concern, of course, but for such a vast area of southern rural, that's an extremely low number. I've tasked out some work around robberies at the moment just to make sure we're not missing a trick in terms of we can do work around the MO, where is it happening, who is committing it. That can inform things like patrols as well. So we're just looking at that at the moment. Violence against the person is up. And this is one of the drivers I mentioned about some of our crime stats going up hugely. There's been some changes to the way crimes are recorded in the last year. And one of the ways in which that's changed is around violent crime. And it would appear that's being reflected on the county. It's just under 20% for Hertfordshire. And we're on an 18.9% increase here. It's just under 350 for the year. That is a concern, but we are seeing higher reporting levels, and we think that's being driven by greater victim confidence. So very often you have a crime type that people don't have faith to report to us, and we are seeing that changing. And what sadly is also driving it is domestic abuse as well. So I've got some data from last year that 23% of all southern rural crime is domestic related. That's quite significant. And it's obviously a very challenging crime type to focus on. It is something we're very much aware of. As a neighbourhood policing team, we certainly do a lot of work on violence against women and girls. That's absolutely the case. That tends to be focused more on our nighttime economy and assaults that happen out in public. We do have a dedicated domestic abuse team that are based down in Hatfield that do a huge amount of work, both in terms of investigating and safeguarding domestic abuse victims, and they will also do problem solving work as well. So it's something we are absolutely aware of as a neighbourhood policing team, but it tends to sit primarily elsewhere, and we monitor it very carefully. And there will be some targeted work we will do around comms, or there are things that we do with our licensed premises around schemes like Ask Angela, which you might have heard of, and other schemes that help to give some level of protection to potential victims of domestic or other violence, and particularly females, because it is overwhelmingly, but not completely, females. So it's there, and it's very much important for us to monitor that. Harassment, again, I'll mention quickly, huge increase, 51% up over the last year. The county has gone up 78% for harassment and stalking in the last year. This is by far and away the biggest driver for the overall crime increase. This is down to the fact that Hertfordshire was identified as a force at our last inspection that we were under recording harassments, and we were. There has been a change in policy, which has led to the extreme other end of that, and we are now over recording them as a result. There is currently a review of the policy that came in last year because it is completely skewing our figures, and it's the main driver behind that overall increase in crime. I've never seen a 78% increase in a crime type in a single year in my whole career. To reassure, it is not because we now think there are many, many more people that are committing stalking and harassment offences. They are out there. And I just want to reassure the councillors, this is primarily a crime reporting issue that is urgently being addressed at county level. So I would hope that will be addressed over the next year. I'm talking an awful lot of stats. So about stats, I'll move on a little bit. Just a couple of headlines. We're down just under 30% for shoplifting in southern rural. That's against a 13% increase for the county. We still have certain areas driving that, and a particular location in Nebworth being one of them, which you can probably know which one that is for those that are familiar. But we are heading in the direction. We now have a dedicated shoplifting plan. I'm sure you'll be aware of that national drive to improve the police response to retail theft. And North Herts is absolutely leading the way on that. And Southern Rural is actually the best performing of North Herts in any area, and that is down significantly. And that's about building those relationships with the retail community, getting them to do what we need to do as well, which is around CCTV provision, providing statements, securing their premises better, hardening that target. They've got a job to do as well. And our job is to come in, get the evidence, investigate that offence and deal with it appropriately. It is volume crime. It will always be volume crime, but it's impacting a significant community that we need to provide that service to. Just one more headline for crimes. Offensive weapons are very low in Hitchin Rural anyway. We're down 50% on the year against a county increase of 33%. We had 6 last year, very low, and we're down to 3. Massive reduction, and it bucks the county trend, which is really, really good to say. I'll talk about ASB very briefly. In virtually every southern rural ward, overall ASB reporting, whether that be environmental, nuisance or personal, is down. There are a small number of wards where it is up, but often from low numbers. So I look at Gravely and Wymondley are up from 19 to 23 in the year. That's a 20% increase. Offa is a slight increase of 2. And Codicott has increased from fairly low numbers too. I'm currently working through why they're an outlier, because every other part of southern rural, I'll give you an example of Hitchwood, for example, is down 40%, which is a remarkable reduction. Kimpton 13%, Nebworth nearly 17%. That's interesting to see. I don't know if it in any way is linked to how we're recording certain crime types, and I'm doing some work around that to make sure we're not missing reports and actually there are hotspots perhaps emerging. If I move on to Herts Connected quickly, as I said, I really hope you're all signed up to it. If you're not, you just need to Google it, and you'll be asked a set of questions and you'll be online in a few minutes. This is an extremely powerful tool that we are only just really understanding in North Hertfordshire. We are absolutely flying on this system. We are the top performing CSP in Hertfordshire in almost every metric for Herts Connected. This is our community engagement system. It enables us to send messaging out. It enables the public to talk to us. It helps us with our engagement because it's linked to the census data from the last census a few years ago, which actually gives us for the first time data down to street and house level around those harder to reach communities. So I'm talking members of ethnic minorities, the travelling community, others that historically have perhaps been less inclined to engage with the police. For the first time, we can actually go to their addresses as part of a street sign-up event and actually speak to those people, try and get them on board, see if they want to be community advisors. And it means that at the moment we are number 1 for engagements, number 1 for the number of surveys that we completed. We did 566 in February, which is absolutely remarkable. And one particular event was in Great Ashby, where we knocked on 491 doors last month, which is absolutely phenomenal. And we've got so much data out of that, so many surveys completed, and it means there is always going to be a sector of the community that are happy to speak to us, but that's the easy bit. How do we get in amongst the ones that don't? And I'm thinking about the young as well. And the OWL, those of you that remember it, the older system, that was great. It had its purpose. There was a particular demographic primarily signed up to OWL. It tended to be older members of the community and the retired, who are still a very important part of our community, but it was a bit one channel. And we've got to widen that out to show that we're actually speaking to those other groups who are underrepresented and who don't want to talk to us. And we need to get in amongst that to find out why. One of the good news, we're also seen as the best performing CSP in Hertfordshire for our social media activity. We've got nearly 8,000 followers on Facebook. We had, I think, barely 1,000 a couple of years ago. Clearly, there's still many, many people who are not signed up for that, but we've been highlighted in terms of how many reports, the quality of them that are coming out into the public. We are number 1, which is really, really good to say. Just move on quickly to the councillor questions. I think I've covered most of them. Councillor Strong, you asked around dangerous parking on double yellow lines. Can police take any action? The answer, of course, is we can. We have attempted several times to get NHC parking enforcement on board so we could do like a joint operation. Response has been mixed. So what I would say is if you've got particular locations in mind, send them to me and we will revisit that. Dangerous parking on double yellow lines is absolutely for us. If a vehicle is causing an obstruction or otherwise causing a danger to road users or blocking pedestrians, then the police should be called, because that needs to be dealt with straight away and the vehicle towed. If it's straight parking, as in double yellow line parking, parking outside schools has always been a very contentious issue as well. Those are more difficult to deal with, and that it's those particular instances that we need to be working with NHC enforcement. I know they have their own challenges as well in terms of resource coverage and everything else, but I'm very happy if you do want to send me any specifics. We'll revisit that and see if we can actually achieve that. There have been some joint ops, mainly in Hitchin Urban before, but they've not been for a while. We need to revisit that because we know for the public it's a big issue. I think, Councillor Graziano, I've covered your queries about speeding, and that's very much something that we need to improve without question. You also asked about drug canisters and cannabis farm debris in rural lanes driven by Luton. I think I covered that as well. So I think that's it. Just from Sergeant Gill, request from him, if any of you want to come out for a ride along. I know Councillor Munsey, you've done that before. You'd be very, very welcome to do that. He's also happy to come out for ward walks with you. Really, really keen to do so. You've just got to send an email to him, come out with the local officer, and that will happen. And very much my drive is to build those relations at that ward level as strongly as possible. And we want to work with you to make Southern Rural better. And he's there and available for you. But yeah, very sorry for not being here tonight. And yeah, that's it. So I don't know if there's any more questions. I'm very happy to take any.
Fine. Thank you very much for that. That was very concise and very informative. Before we go into questions, what I'd like to do is basically pay tribute to our PCSO, Heather Burrows, who's after many years of invaluable work and support to the community in the Southern Rural area, she'll be greatly missed. Yeah. And we thank her sincerely for her service and wish her a long and happy retirement. Perhaps you'll pass that on to her.
Oh, absolutely.
If we may, please.
Absolutely will.
Councillor Munter.
Thank you, Chair. And could I just echo those comments, because PCSO Burrows has been an absolutely superb local officer. She really is what local community policing should be all about. And she certainly should be held up as an example to all of those PCSOs and those PCs as to what we want to see in community policing. So thank you very much, Heather, for your service. Inspector Lant, as always, thank you very much for your comprehensive report and for your continued engagement with councillors. It really is appreciated. And as you've mentioned, you know, I've been very fortunate to attend one of the action days that PC Moore and PCSO Stone put on with respect to speeding in Codicot, and that was really welcomed, and certainly that's something I'd love to be able to come and do again. And certainly a number of different things that you've mentioned tonight, we certainly are going to take back, I'm sure, particularly on an NHDC level with respect to the fly tipping numbers and obviously the parking enforcement, and actually find out what's going on there, because it's crucial that we're working in partnership with the police in order to tackle these issues head on. Certainly as well, with respect to police officer numbers, there are conversations that I certainly will have now as a result of this information with the PCC, and to see what we can do to improve that situation in North Herts. But what I am really concerned about is the fact that for the whole of the district of North Hertfordshire, the 4 towns and over 40 villages that we have in our district, there is one calibrated speed gun. And I think that is absolutely quite appalling, if I do say so. And it's no slight on you, because I know that you've been fighting tooth and nail in order to get this. Could I ask, how much does it cost to actually calibrate one of those speed guns? Because I'm sure that there are county councillors across the district, and certainly the area committees, that if the constabulary can't afford it, we would be more than happy to grant you some money in order to actually enable that you're able to conduct those speeding operations.
Sorry. Yeah, it's several £100 calibrated camera. It has a laser. It has to be done every 12 months. And with regards to the decision behind this, I am aware that it was taken extremely reluctantly in the context of really quite unprecedented financial pressures. I do know from previous conversations with other district councillors that there are small pockets of money. I don't know, it's called a road safety fund or some elements that are given to some councillors each year. I remember speaking to Michael Muir about his in Royston. So I did have in my mind whether there would be a possibility to look at doing anything from a joint point of view to make up some of that shortfall, and perhaps it could be not necessarily performance related, but the commitment from us would be that we would ensure an acceptable and consistent level of response, whether it be the priority locations that I've talked about today. But we primarily focus on those, but it's not that we don't do activity elsewhere. And you talked about the activity in Codicot, which I'm aware of. So the answer is yes. If that is even possible, I would be very happy. We could have a conversation outside this forum. We could see what could be doable. Yes, we're not talking thousands. We're talking a few £100s per device.
Thank you. Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to Inspector Lunn looking at you back there to speak. But I'll speak into the microphone. So probably just a couple of things to call out for everybody's benefit. One, I'd like to highlight the Hearts Connected system to everybody. I think that's been absolutely crucial. I've been involved in some of the rollout of that and setup of some of the neighbourhood watches, and I think the more we can encourage people to get onto that, the better they get engaged, they get information quickly about what's going on in their communities. And then, as you mentioned, I've been involved in looking at some of the issues with the residential burglaries. I'd just like to pass on my thanks to yourself and, in particular, the team that have been dealing with that in terms of significant focus. It really does pose a genuine fear, kind of in the hearts of many residents around this. And yet, at the same time, we're just trying to balance letting people get on with their normal, decent lives, and not throw it out of perspective. But it's very hard. I guess the question I've got is really in terms of, is there anything, you mentioned a couple of things from the officers at the council in terms of engagement, but is there anything more you'd be wanting us as councillors here and more generally to do to get involved in to help educate and communicate around our residents in the wards when we've got a chance?
Yeah, I think it's that ward councillor police relationship is absolutely vital. So all I would ask is, and we have some fantastically engaged councillors already. A number of them are sitting in this room now. It's not the case consistently. I am aware of that, and it would be lovely to know that you were there for us to contact when needed. That we would have those opportunities for meetings where you can give us that sort of community temperature check, which we may not always be getting. Hearts Connected isn't the be all and end all, and sometimes people might disclose things to you that they wouldn't want to disclose to the police. So I think just having a dialogue, knowing who your officers are, knowing how you can communicate with each other, perhaps meeting occasionally, and then just us knowing that you're there for us if there is a bit of work that you can perhaps support us on. It's at that ward level, which is brilliant in many areas, but is a little bit inconsistent in a few. And if we can get that more consistently, that's probably all I'd ask. And it's good to hear, because at the meeting in January I was last at, someone asked exactly the same question as well. And it's very refreshing that seems to be the mindset now. And you're pushing through an open door in terms of us wanting to work as closely as we possibly can do. It's absolutely vital if we're going to make community policing work even better in North Arts. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll take Caroline, if I may, please, and followed by Joe Graziano, who is online.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Inspector Land, for your report there. I had a couple of questions, and I just wondered if it was worth emailing you or worth emailing PC Gill to ask, particularly about the days of action, the Drive Safe volunteers, and how we sort of get involved in that.
Yeah, very happy to help with that. If you email me, I can get you that information. The Police and Crime Commissioner runs the two Drive Safe schemes. So whilst it gives benefit to us when they're deploying in North Hertfordshire, and they actually do quite a lot because one of their vans is based here, so we definitely get some benefit along those lines. They are available for councillors, for the public to link in with, both for you to report your concerns about particular areas. But yeah, if you want to be a volunteer, that'd be absolutely amazing. So yeah, I can provide any information like that, and happy for you, for me to send that information to you.
Yeah, if I can just come in on there, the Drive Safe scheme is an excellent scheme, and we have Councillor Graziano here, who ran a very successful campaign in Breachwood Green. The problem that we seem to have, and I promote it to all of my parish councils, is that everybody moans and groans about the speed of driving through the village, and then you introduce the Drive Safe proposal and everybody suddenly disappears. To actually get volunteers to go for maybe a couple of hours training, maybe even less than that, and then volunteer maybe once a month or whatever it may be, just different times, is very, very difficult. And that, of course, is something that only the public themselves can cure. I'll go. Sorry, are you still?
I was just going to say, we receive multiple reports from the public about speeding, and that's been the case since COVID. I think it's not going anywhere, quite clearly. And in an ideal world, we should be sufficiently resourced that we deal with this as a police service, and we shouldn't necessarily have to need Drive Safe volunteers. But of course, the reality is different. But it does mean that, I mean, this is a fantastic scheme, and it is about being community minded. The point I was going to make was, we will often get these complaints, and we will, of course, respond to them, whatever that response looks like. But we will invariably say, are you aware of the Drive Safe scheme? You know, you clearly have this concern as a local resident, which is, you know, thank you for telling us and making us aware of your concern. And it is almost uniformly that offer is not taken up, that the mindset is, well, it's the police's problem, and that's the end of it. And strictly speaking, for enforcement, at least, it is our problem, and it should be. But the reality currently is that we do need these other schemes to build on where we are not there as visible and not necessarily equipped as much as we would like to be, as I described earlier. So yeah, it's sadly common. The complaint will go in, but then not interested in volunteering.
Caroline, did you have another question?
Yes, sorry, I did. I think from the ward that we look after, there is definitely an aspect of antisocial behavior, right? Okay. So people just totally disregarding the fact that they are driving through, it might be their route home or their route to work, but it is our home, right? So there is that big element. And I think having visibility or posters visible, things saying that this is actually our home would be really beneficial to everybody. So I think as a ward, we'll be definitely taking up some of these things on offer. So thank you.
Absolutely. I have a home abroad, and it's quite interesting on the roads from the airport to my shack. There's cardboard cutouts of police cars, and they have solar lights on them, and you actually see people hitting their brakes when they see them ahead. I'm not sure that we could probably do it in North Hertfordshire, but you're absolutely right. Take your point. Visibility is the key at any time. If a patrol car driving through our country lanes every now and again makes people aware of the fact that it is policed, and it does happen, but obviously, as you say, not quite as much as we would all like. Thank you for that. Can I ask Councillor Joe Graziani to speak?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Inspector Lant, for your presentation today. I found that very useful. Just to echo on, very disappointed that funds are low. However, we can help support you. I note that in Bedfordshire, our adjoining neighbour, they've got a lot of posters up on lampposts to say we're a 30-mile-an-hour zone. Do we have such posters that we could put up on lampposts to encourage people to drive safely through our villages? It may not mean that we need a police officer 24/7, because the reality is we're not going to get that, but it would show that we mean business and people are cutting through our villages. So we can help support you do that. I don't know if there is a scheme to do that in our area, but I know in Bedfordshire they've got these posters up on lampposts, countersigned by Beds Police and Luton Borough Council, saying slow down, 30 miles an hour. That's the first point. The second point, only today, an Audi white car raced through the village and near enough knocked over 10 people. But I was glad and really, reassured that the cop car was after it. So I do know that you are working hard and fighting crime. And just another point, I think the speeding issue is somewhat of a thing that Google and the navigators in cars are promoting, because 15 years ago in our rural area, and I'm talking about Breachwood Green, you would not get through traffic. And I think I do blame the sat navs. And I'm working really hard behind the scenes to canvass and speak to these corporate giants to see if they can put on their sat navs to avoid our local quiet villages, because people are racing through to get to work or somewhere quite urgently. So there are other options available which don't rely on one laser gun available for all of our area. So happy to support you. Thank you.
I'm really grateful for that, Councillor. And yeah, just a few points to pick up on. Thank you for your gratitude there. The signage sounds like a great idea. In policing, solutions are often not complicated. And if something as simple as an appropriately worded sign showing that joint message from us, the council, highways, and us, or whichever partners it would be, absolutely, I can see that. The sat nav point is and I'm happy to take that away and see what we can do around that. That's not complicated. We can do that. I think you make a very good point around sat navs. I had some involvement previously in meetings around the A505, as in towards Royston and Baldock, and particularly those of you familiar with it, and the no entries and the speed limit changes and everything else. And we often have cars driving the wrong way as a result. And I know that led, this was a couple of years ago, to liaison with sat nav companies, where certain moments, certain routes were changed. So it is definitely possible. What I don't know is who is the sort of intermediary that goes into those organisations, who has that connection with them. I don't know if it would probably be highways, and whether or not there's some scope to meet with them and have a discussion as a collective. And I'd be very happy to be part of that as well. But yeah, very much so. Culturally, I think post-COVID as well, I've noticed just a general degradation in driving standards. And I think there is an attitude amongst many drivers that speed limits are a target, which they're clearly not. So it's a cultural mindset thing as well, and that's a very difficult thing for police to do. Our statutory responsibility is enforcement and education as well. Can you make the roads safer through speed bumps and other changes? And that's a matter for highways. It's a difficult thing for us to navigate through, but I don't hide from the point that we need to do our job better. We're never going to be perfect, but I've got some work to do around that, and I wanted to be very clear to the panel today. But your other points, absolutely, and perhaps this conversation about the sat nav and the signs we can have outside the meeting.
Thank you very much for that. On the subject of sat navs, I think the other thing that perhaps has encouraged speeding is the fact that when you put your destination in, it gives you an estimated time of arrival. And it's almost a game to see if you can get there faster than the sat nav predicts. So that might be an idea to ask for that to be wiped off if it's at all possible. I'd like to ask Ralph if you'd like to have a word.
Thank you, and thank you, Inspector Lang, for confirming that it is £700 to recalibrate a laser. Now, obviously, this is the last meeting of this civic year of this forum, and I believe that because of the pre-election period, county councillors no longer are able to spend their locality budget, either highways or otherwise. But certainly, should I be successful in my election to Hertfordshire County Council, please send me an email. And certainly this is something that I would really like to pursue, because it will have a massive impact on our communities, and it's something that residents really want to see action taken on. But could I ask, with respect to HGVs driving through villages, because in Kimpton, for example, there is a 7.5 ton weight limit, and could I ask what the police, what action the police are taking on that? Because it's something that's raised with me quite frequently, not just in Kimpton, but elsewhere. And I'd just be interested to see what the police are doing.
So I may need to come back to you on that, because that's not an issue that's been raised at my level before. It has in other parts of the CSP. I think, for example, the recycling centre on Grove Road and the surrounding weight limits in Hitchin, which has resulted in us doing some targeted days of activity led by Hitchin PCs. So difficult for me to comment without knowing a little bit more of the detail behind it. I mean, again, like any enforcement power, if an HGV is breaching a weight limit, they're committing an offence, which the police have the power to enforce. it is another one of those difficult problems to enforce. I think of the new weight limit on the 507 towards Buntingford is a particular that crosses two CSPs, and there is a lot of interest in that and what steps that both East Herts and North Herts are doing to enforce that. There are also exemptions, I know, and again, not knowing the specifics of Kimpton, that a weight limit, I believe, can be breached depending on where that lorry is going and if it has a particular reason to be within that area. And I'm really scraping the memory of this particular bit of the legislation. That provides another bit of complexity. So I think probably if it's being flagged to you, it's time I have a look at it. Perhaps we can have a conversation outside the meeting. And the answer is, if we need to target that, we will target it.
Great stuff. Thank you.
Claire.
Thank you, and thank you, Inspector Lant, for answering my questions. But parking around is shocking. And the particular, and I'm glad to see the parish council chairman of the village I live in is here, because she'll know exactly the bits of yellow lines that I'm referring to. Because I was driving through the village and cars were parked on it, and it's where there's a junction of another road, and a car shot out. It's only because I was aware and I braked hard, I didn't hit it. And I believe it's because the car's parked on that double yellow line. If they hadn't been there, that car would have seen me and they would have not come into me. So I will be writing to you. I might even provide you with the registration numbers of the vehicles that are there. And I'm sure I can see that the chairman is smiling, so I'm sure she knows of the problem that I'm talking about. But it's endemic around the whole of North Herts. People just seem to abandon their cars. On the safe drive, can I just clarify that the insurance for those that do the safe drive is covered by the police? Because this has been a bit of a question that has not been, that I've had at one of the parish councils I've been at who is actually covering the insurance when they're out on the road and if there is an issue. If you don't know, that's fine, you can come back to me.
And to your earlier point, that incident involving the dangerously parked vehicle, I would expect that to result in a call to police there and then. So I'm quite happy to receive the index of that vehicle now. If a member of the public sees a dangerously parked vehicle that's at risk of causing a collision, or road users or pedestrians having to change their route and at risk of being run over, that is absolutely a dangerous vehicle in a dangerous position. That can be reported to police. It's only that, I won't call it routine, it's breaches of parking regulations where there isn't danger. It would not normally be dealt with by police. But yeah, that'd be my message. But please do send whatever information you want to me, and I'll look into that. The answer about insurance, I don't know, because it's run by the PCC's office. I am going to assume they should be insured, because I can't possibly see a voluntary scheme where they'd be expected to arrange that for themselves. But again, I'd be happy to ask the question and get you an answer. That'd be very easy for me to find out, and I can come back to you.
Ralph, again.
So obviously I noted on the social media that recently we had the barn meet, and I think that's an absolutely fantastic meeting. It's great to see the police working very closely with our rural communities to tackle those specific rural crimes. All I would ask is that could you make sure that councillors are invited to that, so that we're able to, understand what the police are doing on those matters and obviously filter in? And would I be able to then ask, how frequently are you intending to run these barn meets?
So I've already discussed with Councillor Bernard. It wasn't lost on me that there were no Southern Rural councillors there, because it was a Southern Rural and a Royston Rural event. I spoke to the organiser afterwards and established that an invite hadn't been sent. That was clearly an oversight as opposed to a conscious decision. Yes, we did have excellent presence. There was the PCC there, the local MP as well, and a very strong turnout from the farming community. And that was the biggest thing for me to see. And then all sorts of challenging questions coming into us and a really positive experience. So my conversation with the organiser at the end ended with, we need to do two. So there needs to be a Royston Rural, there needs to be a Southern Rural. There's enough of a demand to need that, and that's the plan going forward. In terms of frequency, this was one of a number that were done all around the county in one sort of cycle, and it seems to me that they happen at least once a year. Sometimes they're a bit more frequent. Normally there would be a chief officer there, but on this occasion they weren't available. But I know Andy Profit went to a number of them in this cycle, but just couldn't do the North Herts ones. Given it involves the PCC as well, it's not something that happens every quarter or every month or anything. It seems to be once a year. So I would say that would be the bare minimum that we would aim for. I probably prefer twice a year. If we're looking to split it in two, again, that's another one where we'd be looking for resourcing, and again keeps the frequency wider. But to reassure you, the next one you will be invited to, and you should get a Southern Rural one. And I will go away and look at what a practical frequency is going forward.
Thank you for that. Are there any other questions or comments? Caroline.
May I, if you don't mind? I just wanted to, sorry, I'm going back to yellow lines. If there's a section of road that is particularly dangerous, which doesn't have yellow lines, but we are petitioning for yellow lines, would the police be able to identify that that is potentially a dangerous section of road that should have yellow lines?
Yes, I think it's a different part of the constabulary that would respond to that. We have the exact name of their department escapes me, but we have a strategic team that will deal with things like requests for speed limit changes that come in through Herts highways, perhaps speeding surveys that are done, and also where they're looking at installing traffic humps or anything like that. I believe they would be consulted if there was a plan to install yellow lines, and they would normally come into us as the local team, and they would look at particular sets of data around traffic movements, and they would look at their own reports, and we would give a local input as well. So yes, there would be a form of consultation as part of that decision-making process with police.
Thank you. I see no other lights. In which case, thank you, Inspector Lant, for a very informative and interesting talk this evening. I hope that our councillors here will have taken an awful lot of information from you, and no doubt they'll be in touch with anything that they think of after the meeting. But just one comment that I would like to, I was at Ickleford Parish Council last evening, and we were privileged to have the local rural policeman and the PCSO there. Now, I represent 8 different parish councils, and we don't see any PCSOs or police officers there. It would be rather nice if maybe every 3 months they could, maybe one of them come along to give us an insight into their local activities, and even more the larger picture that you've expanded upon this evening, which we found very, very interesting. If you could perhaps give that some thought, it would be great. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for coming along this evening. I'm sure everybody appreciates your attendance. Thank you. Okay, I intend to take item number 2, which is the governance, after item number 7, if that's okay, if everybody agrees with that. In order that our parish councils can come along and have a little chat with us and rob us of all our money, then we move on to item number 3, isn't it? And I'd like first of all to invite Laura, our community partnerships officer, to update on the budgets, please. Oh, you just disappearing.
Sorry, I was about to move one of the cards about. Apologies, I'm just going to find it. So currently in the Southern Rural grant budget, there's £4,365 available. The total amount of funding being requested for this meeting is £4,000. And if all grants are recommended and subsequently approved by the exec member, there'll be £365 available to carry forward into the 25-26 budget, subject to approval from Cabinet.
Thank you very much. Right, then we'll go on first to our first grant application, which is on behalf of Holwell Parish Council. I'd like to welcome Anne Warner and Councillor Yvonne Hart, the Chair. You have 5 minutes. Thank you very much.
Am I on? Oh, yes. Good evening, Chair. Good evening, councillors. Thank you for this opportunity for us to apply for a grant. Little bit of background. Many of you will already know Holwell Parish Council is a very small council with an extremely low precept, and we always try and do the very best for our village with limited funds. 5 years ago, we were able to begin to raise enough money to replace the very old, dilapidated and crumbling pavilion in the recreation ground, which had become unusable. We had a builder who wanted to do the build for his portfolio and did a great job for a fixed amount based on the grants we were able to secure. So the whole build was done with grant money. We didn't use any of our precepts money for that. We do believe he lost money on it, and since finishing the build, he has not been wanting to liaise with us. When it came to the signing off of the build, we found out that the fire precautions that were installed were domestic and should have been commercial, and London Building Control will not sign off the build. The builder's response was that he had done what the architect instructed and it wasn't his fault. We were in touch with the architect trying to sort this out when we were informed by his son that he had died very, very suddenly, leaving us in a state of limbo. When this happened and it was going through London Building Control, a fire safety officer from Herts, Stuart Joyner, came and carried out an evaluation of the premises, and it was deemed as adequate, but this was not enough to sign the build off. We cannot let or hire out the pavilion until we have the certificate. That includes the cricket club from Ickleford, who play every year at us, and we get some money towards costs for them. If this is not done, we're going to lose that money, which is quite substantial for us. So we can't let or hire out the pavilion until we have the certificate. It's going to cost us nearly £4,000, which we really do not have. That's almost half of our precept. We were going to apply for £3,000, but we were advised that the pot was smaller than we thought. However, if there is any additional money than the £2,000 that we have applied for, Holwell would be very grateful. We're asking for this grant, which will help towards the cost, and hopefully we will be able to finally get this sorted and get that pavilion used the way it could be. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do any councillors have questions of Yvonne? Claire?
Well, I suppose I should declare that I live in the village. I do know the pavilion. And also there's a comment in there about the Rands Education Foundation, of which I'm a governor of that charity. I mean, obviously something went seriously wrong here between the architect and the build. I mean, it's very clear that it was it's not a domestic building, and it was going to be used as a pavilion, and members of the public would be in it, and therefore one would have thought it would have met minimum requirements, so that it would be constructed so that it could be used for the intent that the village and the parish council commissioned it to be built. However, this is a terrible predicament that they are in, and as quite has been said, it is a very small village. We have a very small precept in the village and funding for this. I mean, it was a tremendous effort to be able to get a pavilion at all, given how cash strapped the village is. But that was done. It's just, I say, just sad that the end of it was that they're left with a building now that cannot be used for the intent unless this work is done. I mean, obviously, as a villager, one would like to see it used and being able to be commissioned. And therefore, I think really the only route that there is to come for further grant funding from us as a body. As I said, it's just so sad that the architect and the builder didn't seem to realise that there was minimum standards that were required to make this a commercial building, and that what they were building, the doors would never be part of fire regulation, and to be able to get that building working as soon as we can, I think, for the village and for the Ickleford community, for the others that want to use it. And there are other people in the village who would like to use the building, but obviously can't for the moment. So I hope that the committee will be, what's the word? Will be feeling very generous tonight in that regard. But I do believe that as I have an interest, I will not vote.
Okay, thank you very much, Claire. I just comment that as the county councillor for Howell, I was pleased to grant aid the kitting out of the new pavilion and probably cups and saucers, or was it toilet pans or something like that. But the reality is, it is a magnificent new building, financed locally, and how they actually managed to raise all the funds on is wonderful. It provides for the local community and beyond. Ickleford Cricket Club use it, and I'm sure other organisations and clubs would want to use it as well, and it becomes the lifeblood of the community, and for that reason I will most certainly be supporting the application, and if there's a little bit of a carry forward, we might even consider putting that on top of the grant if it is at all possible, if the councillors thought that was an appropriate thing to do. So now, do we vote at this point? Oh, sorry, Ralph, you want to speak?
Oh no, I was going to propose it, but
Sure, if we vote at this stage, do we? Okay, well, if there are no further questions, you'd like to propose it, and Louise?
Happy to second.
Excellent, thank you. Well, those in favour, was there a proposal for a little bit extra? Are you allowed to do that? Well, yes, Paul.
I was going to say, sorry, my PC's died, but if we've got that, was it 300 quid left or something on top? Could we add that onto the top of the 2,000 and just give them the balance?
yeah.
If you are proposing that, I'll happily second it.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm
Okay.
proposing.
So the balance of the budget would be 365 if all applications this evening are successful. Is that right? I'm looking along the top line here.
we have £365 left.
Yeah.
Should all of the
Yes.
the £4,000
That's right.
have be granted. So yeah, I mean it makes sense. We use our budget to support this community facility and make sure actually it gets back into use for the community.
Good. Paul has proposed that the grant then be up to 2,365. Is that right? Yeah. I will happily second that.
I think Louise.
Yeah.
Did you? All right. Okay.
Yeah, I'll second.
Doesn't
that,
matter who
definitely.
seconds it. Well, all those in favour? Thank you, Joe.
Joe.
Yes, we have. I said thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
You put your hand down now, Joe. Thanks.
can you? Well, I'm abstaining. I think I have an interest.
Joe, did you wish to speak? He's got his hand up.
No, I was voting. I'm voting
Right.
for
Yeah.
voting.
Right. Thank you. We were waving to you as well, Joe. So thank you for that. Okay, good. So that will be granted for £2,365, subject to our executive member ratifying our recommendation. Okay.
So don't spend it. Do not.
We won't spend it
No,
yet.
no,
We
wait,
promise.
But we have fallen foul of this before, where we have made a recommendation and the money's been spent, and then we've been told that unfortunately it becomes retrospective and therefore not valid. So please sit on your wallet for a little while. Well, thank you, ladies, and good luck. I'd like now, please, to introduce David Sample, who is a clerk to Offaly Parish Council, who'd like to make your submission. If you hang on just 1 second.
Oh, wait, sorry. You do have someone first.
Oh, I just need to declare interest because I sit on the parish council of Great Offaly. So we all have a cross to bear, yes. I'll refrain from voting, yeah.
Yeah, you know.
As good as that. Thank you, Chair, and members of the forum. My name is David Sample, and I'm clerk to the Offaly and Cockenhoe Parish Council. Thank you very much for inviting me along this evening. It is past my bedtime, but I'm sure you can all cope as well as I can. I've come along this evening to ask for a grant support to refurbish a mugger that we have at Offaly Recreational Centre. The mugger was first introduced in 2010 through a grant from North Herts Council and one of the waste contractors, which you could get it in those days, but you can't get it now. In 2014, 2012, 2013, Offaly were allowed to build some houses through Crowdace, and we received some S106 monies. And at that time, we updated the mugger to include a cage. We're not sure whether to keep the kids in or to keep the kids out, but it worked anyway. Since then, everything seemed to go fairly well, and we keep the place clean and tidy, and it's monitored every year through North Herts Council services with regard to damage to equipment. Back in 2024, you may recall that we had some pretty terrible storms, and the mugger was damaged by a tree falling across and taking out 6 of the panels. Now, I claimed for those panels through Offaly Place, who owned the land which the tree was set upon. That in turn let us think that, well, now's a good time to upgrade it so that it can then continue for another 10 plus years. The grant I'm asking for is for £2,000 against a total project cost of £3,073. The parish will fund the balance out of its reserves. Offaly, as I'm sure a lot of you are aware, and if not, I'm pleased to tell you, it's a well-supported area, good recreation centre which hosts lots of activities including junior football, tennis, outdoor gym equipment. And one of the most used areas is the children's play area. That also was updated back in 2012, 2013. And it's never looked back. The updating of the mugger is not to replace the damaged units, but to replace the broken ball backs where the hoops are, for those of you that have the lingo, the hoops, and to have the base completely cleaned and remarked for basketball, and of course it's also the same as a five-a-side side. So here I am today, cap in hand, asking you for the consideration. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillors, do you have questions of Mr. Sample? Yeah. Claire.
I was going to say, if there are no questions, I would very happy to propose that we grant the 2,000. It is a well-used facility, and it would be such a shame to the community if we didn't put this additional investment there. So I'm hoping somebody will second my proposal.
Caroline.
I'm happy to second that. I think any facility for sports, especially for the youngsters, is definitely worth the funding.
Thank you. So the proposal is for £2,000 towards the £3,073 project cost. Can I have recommendation? Yes, we have. And we have a proposal. We have a second. Are those in favour of granting?
We can see him.
Thank you, Joe.
He's waving at us again.
I thought you were volunteering to buy us all a beer. Jolly good. Thank you very much. Well, that concludes the grants. So now, moving on, item number 5 is the information note on bin deliveries. We don't have a representative here this evening who can answer questions on that. I'm sure probably councillors, you are very aware of the new bin 3 weekly system and so on and so forth. And I wonder if you wanted to pass on this and ask any questions directly of the executive member. How do you feel about that? Are you happy to pass, or do you have questions or comments you'd like to make now? Councillor Munster.
Well, certainly people are waking up to the fact that now, bins are going to be collected once every 3 weeks because of obviously their council tax bill coming through the post and the literature contained within that. And certainly whilst there are colleagues here who don't agree with that decision, myself being one of them, it's our duty as our district councillors in order to inform our residents of the changes to this service. So this note is obviously very helpful in that. And there are a number of briefings of which will be taking place with the waste team. And I would encourage all colleagues to attend those so that we're better equipped to deal with the inquiries of which residents pose to us as a result of this new contract.
Thank you. Claire.
Yes, I think certainly some of the residents and what I picked up on the bins and the 3 weekly collections is for the residual bins where there are large families and there might be nappy waste and everything else going into them. And I think families struggle with a 2 weekly collection. And I suppose one of the questions that I really would like to get answers on is how easy is it going to be for a family to say, hey, could we have a larger bin? Because the small purple bins are inadequate and for some families, not all families, and as much as you can do as much recycling, but for some families, I just think they are going to struggle. And I would really like to get assurances from the portfolio holder that, and what the line of communication is to be able to register and to actually request as a larger bin or additional collections. I think the larger bin route would probably be the best, although I do recognise that 3 weeks of that rubbish sitting in that bin is going to be unpleasant for anybody. But that's the big question that I don't think I have yet seen documented. I really would like to know that so we can feed that back for those concerned residents. And the other thing I think that is also, and again, maybe it's something we need to go back to our parish councils about, is that with all these disappearing litter bins around, which could necessarily put additional pressure onto the bins that are left, whether or not we're going to get additional collections of, there is always a sign that says, if this bin is full, ring and we'll empty it. Again, will we get those signs? Will we be able to get those litter bins? Because otherwise what we're going to see is a lot of additional litter around the district. And I know we all do lots of litter picking and it's fabulous. But the reality is, if we could actually have bins to put the litter in the first place, that would take the pressure off a lot of seeing the litter going around in the countryside. So those are a couple of things. I don't know if we can feed that back. Questions?
So I believe that there was a representative planning to come for the June forum as well. So I don't know if these are questions also.
Well, if we perhaps put those questions, we could perhaps put those questions if anyone's got any others. And then I certainly do think we need to have somebody here with us. And again, I would like that meeting, I think, to be here in the chamber so that we can again invite parish councils if they want to dial in. And also it's recorded and people can then look at the meeting afterwards.
Yeah, when it comes to the last agenda item, which is future topics, we're happy to, we can kind of set that out for the year, maybe might be the easiest, but yeah, absolutely.
Certainly, I think certainly bins will be the agenda because by that time people will have received their 4th bin. I'm sure there's already a bit of grumbling about where it's going to go. For those that have built their little bin stores for 3 bins, have now got to make them look tidy. They've now got to decide where the 4th bin goes. And actually, for those that weren't there, we did have a strategic planning meeting which I was at, where we were talking, and one of the things we talked about was that if you have loads of bins around in your district, we do need going forward for the planners and the architects and everyone who's giving us plans to actually take into account that every house needs to store, as prettily as they can, 4 bins, ideally out of sight.
Thank you. I'd just like to add to that. I think I've had probably twice as many emails in the last few days since it's been announced and the pretty little picture went out. And not one has been in favour of it. A lot of them don't understand it as yet, but obviously that's our job to make sure that they do. But the thing that is also of great concern is the disappearing litter bins. Now, we were all briefed on 1 in 3 litter bins to be removed, etc., etc., etc. But the experience that I've got through my constituents is that sometimes the wrong litter bins have been gone, leaving holes in the ground, and also an overflow of litter bins and so on and so forth. Parish councillors have said that they weren't necessarily properly consulted on that, certainly not given a graph of which ones were going to be removed. And I wonder if we should be asking the executive member whether in a couple of months' time, whenever, they would, or that the executive member would consider requests from the parish councils to reinstate or remove or move to another place the bins to provide a satisfactory service. Well, I don't know what you feel about that, Councillor Munster.
I'm sorry, I think everyone's sort of, fastest finger first. Certainly, I know with Kimpton and Coddycock Parish Councils, we've been engaging very much with the shared waste service in order to identify those litter bins where we potentially want, well, the parish council potentially wants to take ownership and responsibility of them, and to try and say, well, look, we've got hypothetically a figure plucked out of the air, 7 bins. We don't want the 7 that you're proposing to keep. We want the 7 bins located at these following locations. So I think it's very much on, the onus is on us as district councillors to make sure that we're working with our parish councils in order to ensure that, the local need for litter bins is prioritised, and that those officers who are currently undertaking that litter bin rationalisation, they understand the local challenges. But certainly, I got in touch with an officer probably about 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, after Coddycock Parish Council, and I've managed to get those litter bin rationalisation delayed, so that those discussions can take place. So it's definitely something I'd recommend colleagues do if they've got concerns.
Louise, sorry.
I am going. Yeah, I agree with what Councillor Muntz was saying, in that I've had a very similar experience with Ickleford Parish Council. You have to very much drive the consultation yourself as a member with them. The one thing I think I would like to hear from the waste team is why there's been no communication via the council website as to why the litter bin rationalisation was necessary. We've had a lot of communication on the new 3 weekly bin cycle, but this aspect has been a little bit missing. So I just think there should be a little bit more information out there for our residents as to why that change was required, and perhaps how it was done.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just echo what you said. I've had exactly the same experience in Nebworth. In fact, having spent time with the parish council modifying a couple of the bin selections to keep a couple of bins that are on key walking and dog walking routes to the poo bin point. Those bins were removed anyway after having agreement that they weren't going to be removed. So the team have acted swiftly to say they're going to fix the error, but nevertheless, I think my experience sounds like a lot of people's experiences are both as Louise's point, the communication of this and the rationale for it to our residents, as well as the execution, is just below what we should expect, frankly. And I think it would be a good idea to have that discussion that we're talking about, so that we can be clear when we're talking to residents about it, and help make sure that it gets implemented with least impact.
Thank you. Because obviously there's been a lot of conversations around bins, right? And litter and flower tipping and chicken and couches and sofas not fitting in bins, etc. But there's also this very big aspect of there's a takeaway in Hitchin, right? And the time it takes for a person, a specific person, to eat their takeaway and then just lob the bag out the window I mean, seriously, every single Friday night, right? Without fail. The receipt is in there with the last 4 digits of the card number, right? So I'm going to start collecting them. I'm going to find out who it is. But also bottles with a very suspicious yellow fluid in it, right? And it's not Fanta, I know for a fact. But there is the aspect of bins and bins overflowing and maybe litter, flying out of it if it's a particularly windy day when the bin hasn't been emptied. But there is also this antisocial lobbing of litter out windows of cars that is also a massive, massive issue. And it's an education thing, right? Again, I say, this is my home that you're just lobbing I did shout at somebody out the window of my house to pick up your litter. But it just happens, so there's so many aspects of litter and there's so many aspects of these bins that need to be addressed, right?
Yeah, I'm going to go to Joe in one moment, but absolutely agreeing with you. I live in the middle of a field basically, and the lane on a Saturday morning, there's 3 golden arches, is it, or whatever, and littering everywhere, empty cans, bottles, and so on and so forth, and the reality is that the people who throw those things out of their car as they drive by probably go home, go onto their drive, and their bin is beside their car on the drive. They're just too damned idle to take it home with them. Maybe we could ask our enforcement officers. We've got dog fouling signs, we've got other signs. Maybe the tasteful signs that can be put up in our black spots to say, please take your litter home. Simple as that. Maybe we should do that. Joe. Mute.
Is that better? Hello there. Thank you, Chair. I agree with my colleagues talking earlier about the way that this is landing. The communication has been poor. We attended Buntingford and everything was all fanfare. But the reality is, since that post has been put up on social media, it has caused a lot of emails into me, and I'm sure my colleagues are receiving a lot of disgruntled information or false information. I think some of the key points we should feed back to the portfolio holder for environment is that if we're reducing waste, why have we still got to have a need for a purple bin? Why did we not think about having a smaller purple bin? And secondly, there are bags available for properties that cannot physically have 4 bins, i.e. terraced or townhouses. Where are they going to go? So I'm not too clear about the solution there. I did read some social media from our executive portfolio holder that you can put it in a bag or use someone else's bin. That was the first point. So have they thought about reducing the purple bin size if we're going to increase our recycling rate from 57%? I don't think that's been thought about. Second point is that the litter bin rationalisation has caused also some inbox furies. I think it's been landed poor. And in connection to some of my colleagues there, I did get a response from the portfolio holder about why the bins were removed. It was due to the waste contract being implemented, and a certain waste contractor, I think Veolia, as a part of negotiation, wanted some bins removed to reduce costs. So I have that from the portfolio holder. But again, it's also causing issues about poor communication. So I think as a Southern Rural Forum, we should go back to the executive portfolio holder and ask some serious questions, because as councillor representatives, we've got to do our bit and promote what has been agreed, and it can be hard navigating some of these poor messages and furious residents online. It's very difficult to manage.
Thank you, Joe. Well said. David, did you want to have a word?
Yes, thank you, Chair. As a parish clerk, I can assure everybody that around about October the 30th last year, as a parish clerk at the council, I did receive a draft report outlining about the bins, but there's been nothing since, and there certainly has not been any communication with Mr. Joe Public at all. Hence the furore. And I'm very surprised and pleased that Councillor Muncher at least got them to delay it. Good luck for the future.
Thank you, Ralph.
Thanks. And look, I mean, rarely do we see cross-party agreement here, but I think this is certainly one of those occasions that we're all furious, quite frankly, with how this has landed, and we're all very disappointed with sort of the lack of communication from the administration as to how this is being rolled out. Certainly with respect to the litter bin rationalisation and the implementation of the waste contract as a whole, that could be something that is taken away to overview and scrutiny, and either we have the executive member and the officers or the relevant officers appear before the committee and answer a number of questions, or we could go and do a task and finish group to look into it. But certainly, you know, on Councillor MacDonald's point about people throwing litter outside of their cars, it's absolutely disgraceful. There is no excuse for it. It's completely and utterly unacceptable. And certainly, I think if we can try and get some advice from our environmental crime team, because one would have thought that, you know, if you witness such an offence taking place, you try and gain some video evidence or at least their registration plate, and obviously then a photo maybe of the litter of which they've discarded. But certainly that would be something which I think would be useful to seek further clarification on.
Yes, thank you. I see no other requests to speak. I wonder then whether you would like a request to be sent to the executive member, asking the executive member to revisit the decision, or whether you would perhaps like this decision to be put to overview and scrutiny if that is appropriate. Claire.
Well, I think with respect, the waste contract did go to ONS before it was signed off. And there has been a fair amount of discussion, and particularly all the way through when it was being worked through before they actually got to the final part and actually ended up with the new contract and the announcement. But I think going over it, I don't think it's going to serve anything. I think what we have to get right is the communication that we get out. Now, there is additional money that's been budgeted for. We've heard that there's going to be potentially a little app that's going to be produced so that people can go to their little app to know which bin it is on that particular week. As I keep saying to people, I think for those that are not so well socially literate, or whatever you want to call it, they'll do what they normally do. They check what the neighbours have put out and they do the same. And I think there's a lot of people that will be very switched on to what bins go out when. My concern is, as I said earlier, is more about for the residual waste, because the purple bin, I know Councillor Graziano was talking about making the bins smaller, and for some families maybe that will be right, and for for households where lots and lots of recycling is done. But I think some with the smaller purple bins some families currently have, I think they will struggle. And I think what we should be making sure is that there's provision going to be somehow for those residents and those families to be able to, if they need to, either get additional collections or get a bigger bin for that. I do note on the briefing note that we had in our papers on page 15, it did say a waste department representative has requested to present to the community forums across North Hertfordshire for the service in June. So I would very much hope that we have somebody coming. It would be nice, I think, as councillors, if we were actually advised of what the communications were in advance. I mean, I didn't know that I was going to suddenly be plastered and seeing the pictures of the bins on social media. There was no advice warning saying we're starting a campaign to throw that out. Maybe I missed it in MIS, but I always feel that if officers have got a communication, they could actually email global councillors with an email setting it out. Don't rely on us to have to go into the information service to find something. If they really want to broadcast information, please send it directly to my inbox box, because that's where I'll read it. So again, I think that's perhaps, I don't know whether you share that with me, but I think there is sometimes a lack of communication directly to us. And I think that's the very least, it would be courteous at least to have told us we're starting a Facebook campaign or whatever was going on, or this is going on our websites. Thank you.
Ralph.
I would just echo the comments of Councillor Strong there. I think at the very least, the cabinet member could attend the next forum to obviously answer sort of any pressing questions. But equally, it might be worth, and I'm not sure, as I'm going to put David as the complete and utter representative of the parish councils and the parish clerks here, but it might potentially be useful for the executive member to hold a briefing with those parish councils so they're equally better prepared to answer any queries that residents come to them with.
We just put all the details forward to our district councillors. Let them sort. It's their problem, not mine.
Fair enough.
Oh, kind. I note on here that a Waste Department representative has requested to present to the community forums across North Herts on the new bin collection service in June to go through the changes. A little bit like putting the cart before the horse, but we need to note that. I think perhaps we would wait until the result of that meeting before we make any further recommendations for the executive member to revisit. If there are no other comments, we'll leave it at that. So is there anything else to say? There's no recommendation. Noted. Good, thank you. Item number 6, an information note on the EcoFlex scheme. I think probably you've all read your agendas, and so therefore it won't be that necessary to go through everything on there. I just basically, obviously, the North Herts Council working in partnership with the National Energy Foundation to offer this EcoFlex scheme, and eligibility criteria are set out. You will have no doubt noted this in your agendas. Are there any comments that you'd like to make? No. Moving swiftly on then, and here we come to Laura's part, which is the community update. If you'd like to update us, please.
Hello. So there's nothing further, much further than what's on the report already. Just a few things to highlight, mainly as the council have launched a survey to hear residents' thoughts on the council's future sustainability strategy. The deadline to complete the survey is the 31st of March. There will be a link on the notes, on the notes as well for where that can be found, but just sort of promoting it via sort of here as well in the forum. And also a little highlight and shout out to the North Herts Heroes winners. The awards took place at the chairs event not last Friday, a couple of weeks ago. And yeah, just to say that the videos are now on the North Herts YouTube channel, and please take a look because yeah, they're great stories and great people.
Forgive my ignorance, but did anyone from Southern Rural win? And would you like to share their superb endeavours?
Oh, you put me on the spot trying to remember each of them. I know. I will share the links with you, and it will tell you about some of them are groups, and the groups kind of cover district ones. So like Stand By Me, it was sort of, although I don't know where that specific young star lived, but they do help sort of around the villages as well. So yeah, I'll put the link onto the notes as well for that.
Are there any other comments? No? Jolly good. Thank you for your continued hard work. We do appreciate it. And so we're going to go back now to item number 2, which is the community governance review. Again, no doubt you've seen all of this in your agendas. I'd just like to ask you if there are any comments or additions you'd like to make. And Claire, you would.
Yes, I would, because we did see the paper at full council, and obviously it was really just to let us know that the review was ongoing and this was the report. However, having spoken to some of my parish councillors, and particularly for the councils where they currently have 9 members and the report is suggesting to go down to 7. And I have to say, even though when they put in feedback at the beginning of the review where they said actually they were quite happy with 9, the recommendation in that report was to go to 7, and obviously that will go out for consultation. But I, having spoken to them, and I totally understand why they feel that a parish council of 9 is important to them, because a lot of the parish councils within the villages, they have lots of other bodies, and that means parish councillors sit on these other bodies. And if you reduce the number down to 7, there just aren't enough parish councillors. You know, they feel they're going to be working on too many additional outside bodies that they've got to go on to. And there is just too much work within the village for them as parish councillors to be sitting on. And I don't know whether that's similar to all the other villages around, but I think, you know, what I've told them to do is to make sure that they do make a strong representation when the consultation goes out again, because it will then get discussed. But certainly I know that I will be supporting the parishes that say if they've got 9 members, they want to keep 9 members, because the workload that they do with all the additional bodies that they want to go and sit on, to reduce it to 7, it means you're putting more burden on people, and the likelihood of even finding people that want to come and be parish councils will be diminished. So I just thought I'd make that point.
Absolutely right. And I agree entirely. Ickleford is again in question. They have 9, and I think it's recommended to drop down to 7. Is that right? It's a little bit more complicated because Lavender Grove is going to be separated a little bit, isn't it? So yeah. Sorry, carry on, please, Louise.
Their recommendation is to go from 8 to 7, but that 7 should be split between 5 for Ickleford Parish and then 2 for a separate ward of Lavender Grange. And they share similar concerns in that would effectively then leave 5 people to do the work that currently 8 are doing. So I've encouraged them to write in, and the clerk certainly will put, well, to stay at 8, they want to stay at 8. So.
From Lavender, that could be an 8.
Well, the clerk and the chair there are very clear in their views, and I'm sure they'll communicate them.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, thank you. I'll just reiterate what other councillors are saying. I'm sure Nebworth Parish Council will duly feedback on the consultation formally, but informally, I've just got some feelers and the concern. People get the need to be seen to be having contested elections for democracy's sake, but the reality is we hardly ever do, because not enough people want to stand because they're all volunteers, and not enough people want to do work, and you'll just spread the same amount of work amongst fewer people, and we risk the situation where nobody will want to do it anymore, and I think that's bad for local democracy.
Absolutely. And of course, the other thing that maybe hasn't been considered is that there could well be events whereby, having reduced the number of parish councillors through illness, holidays or whatever, they may risk being in Court far more than they are right now. It does happen, you know. It's interesting to note that the second consultation, the second public consultation, starts tomorrow, and it goes through until the 9th of May. So if there are comments, recommendations or objections to be made, please encourage the public and the parish councils to make their representations between tomorrow and the 9th of May. Ralph.
No, I would just echo what colleagues have said, and we're very fortunate in our area to have such active and engaged parish councils who really do make a significant positive difference to our communities. And certainly this is obviously a draft document. It's one that, as we know, is going out for consultation, and I think it's our duty to ensure that our parish councils are fully aware of what's being proposed in the local vicinity, make sure that they obviously submit, or encourage them to submit, a comment to the consultation, and then of course when this is discussed at full council in, I believe it will be July, then that's the opportunity, if there aren't any revisions to the document, then to propose amendments to numbers, for example, to make sure actually that the communities are served in the way that they want to be. Certainly, I know that Kimpton and Codicott, they have issues with the reduction in the number of parish councillors, and obviously if that's not changed as a result of the document that comes before council, then I certainly would be proposing an amendment, and I would happily support any colleague who is going to be proposing an amendment that would be in line with the views of their local parish council.
Thank you. There will be paper versions of this at the councillor surgeries every month in the 4 different towns, or it can be done online, but to certainly encourage comments to come forward. The other part of the suggestion that is being made, of course, is that town councils for Hitchin, Letchworth and Baldock shall be formed. That's will be out for consultation as well. That may well be slightly linked to the possibility or probability of becoming unitary authority in Hertfordshire. Are there any other comments you'd like to make? No? Good. Well, note that. Thank you very much. And we come on to item 8, which is the ward members' activities. Anybody got anything to say about what they've been doing elsewhere within the law? I'm looking at Joe. Claire.
Going to say it is late. It is late, but I will say that I was at a groundbreaking ceremony or whatever in Purton last night, where it was good to see you there too, Laura, and Councillor Barnard, where finally all it's coming together for them to actually start building their new pavilion on their recreation. It's a huge project, and I'm sure you're going to hear lots about it over the next few months and years probably. But it was just really good to see that finally they've come together with money that North Herts District Council has given, Section 106 money that they got from their Carla development, and also the Football Federation, who've put in a big slum of money as well. But it will be fabulous when they finished it, and the communities that use the facilities on their recreation, they really did need a new building, a bit like Holwell, but a big scale. That's all.
Thank you. Yeah, that was a jolly good event, and it was good to see Louise, yourself, and others putting a shovel in the ground. That was excellent. Okay.
Laura.
Well, Laura did too. Oh, sorry, Laura. I do beg your pardon. I was probably helping the.
You weren't there, were you, Louise?
Weren't you there? Oh no, it was Val, wasn't it? Yeah. Okay. Right. Okay. Moving swiftly on.
Yeah. Thank you. Just one quick update, as I'm sure colleagues are aware. The deadline for the DCO on the Luton Airport expansion is fast approaching. Of course, government has given the green light for Heathrow to expand. It's also given the green light for Gatwick to expand as well. So certainly something that we have been questioning officers on at the Overview and Scrutiny Committee on Tuesday was obviously the council's response to that. And I've asked that regardless of what happens, whether government decides to grant the DCO or whether it refuses that application, so that members of the Southern Rural Forum are kept updated and abreast of the council's response. So hopefully that will be useful, and hopefully government will reject the application and ensure that Luton Airport doesn't expand.
Yes, thank you. I echo that. It would be rather nice to see our new MP supporting his community. I haven't seen it as yet. May well be too late. Right, topics for future forums. Anybody got any bright ideas? Yes.
Sorry, if I could just say, when we're looking at future topics and forums, as far ahead as you can get on topics that you would like, also venues as well to consider for that. So if there's a topic and you like a specific venue or to be here, that just kind of makes sure we can book it in as much in advance and try and give as much notice to everyone. But
I think
my only. Thank you.
I think we're in agreement that because of the topic of bins and so on and so forth, and the fact that there might be a lot of people coming in online as well, that we should meet here for the June meeting. Do you agree? Okay. Thank you very much.
Yes, Yes, I would support that we meet here. I think we also should be telling committee services, please not to have any other meetings on during the day that would delay the start of our meeting, because I think that's totally unacceptable. And I hope you'll feed that back. This meeting had been scheduled to be in the chamber and to be online. And I think it could have been avoided if they had not booked that meeting on the same day. I'm sorry, but that's how I feel. I think bins is a definite topic, but I'm sure that there are other things like if we by that time we do know about the airport expansion, again, I think there might be some things on that we might be wanting to look at as well, particularly in terms of measurements of air pollution and that. I think we need to get ahead of the curve on that, because if there's going to be any change, I think it will be good if we know what the monitoring is, particularly of noise and particulates in the atmosphere, because I think that's a requirement that the airport will have to do.
Additionally, for those who are affected or wish to make comment, the appeal for our refusal of the solar farm at Wandon End is now registered, is open, and I think we've got about 4 or 5 weeks to make representation to the inspector from Bristol. So I encourage you to do so if you consider that sometimes solar farms are in inappropriate places. Karen.
I was going to say, and the only other topic I think will have to come up sometime during the year will be the devolution and what impact that has to the council. And again, I think if there's going to be communication coming out, again, I think that's something we need to be able to feed out to our own local communities.
Okay. If there is no other business to be transacted, no other suggestions or comments to be made, can I thank you very much for your forbearance, especially the fact that we were an hour late starting, and the contributions this evening have been wonderful. Thank you very much, and talk to you soon.